initiative. So is it working at all? So if it is, then how effective it is. And if it is effective, how can we grow? What next can we do with it? So we'll get on to the governance aspect of a community. And why I have said that, we need to keep it lightweight is because one of the key things about community is, see, the primary output of any community is knowledge, right? And knowledge per se is intangible. So when we talk about governing communities or managing communities, then we are actually talking about paradox. Because people in communities share their experiences and knowledge in a free-flowing way, and they use their creativity to do so. By very nature, communities are informal, they're organic and spontaneous. So if we supervise them very heavily, or if we interfere with them, then it's against the very basic tenets of the community. So this in turn gives us a challenge, and therefore the opportunity also when we enable communities in an enterprise. And that's why I have emphasized on that term where we say lightweight governance, right? So what we do is, if we look at governance in 3 dimensions, the first dimension is operational. So we say, okay, if we want to govern the operational aspects of a governance, so this is definitely an easy thing to do. Given the sophistication in IT systems that we have, in automation that we have in the world today, this is definitely an easy thing to do. So what we have is a community meter. Now we say that a community is active if the community is growing, okay? And growth necessarily need not be confined only to subscriber base. Growth can be subscriber base also. But over and above that, it could also be growth in terms of the content. So how many ideas are getting shared? How many good practices are getting exchanged, right? How many events are happening? In those events, how many people are participating? So growth, collaboration, employee engagement are all tied to each other. Why? Because if you have a community which is predominantly expert-driven, so you have a community of practitioners, let's say all the SMEs related to a particular area, a process area, are coming together, they are collaborating, and they've created a community. Now, in this community, one of the prime indicators would be the level of engagement of all these SMEs in terms of responding to queries that are posted, challenges that are posted. So then active collaboration and employee engagement are tied to each other. The community is conducting webinars every month. So how many people are actually registering for the webinars and listening to the webinar, and post the webinar, they would prefer to do a redux on the webinar with the expert who conducted the session in the first place. So then you know that your community is a very actively engaged, employee engaged community. So growth, collaboration, and engagement, therefore, are operational metrics or measures that indicate whether your community is alive, it's ticking, it's active, and it's able to infuse a larger audience out there, which is the subscriber base. Right? So this is the first thing. So it's a very fundamental metric that is needed to know if your communities are alive. Otherwise, we've seen, I mean, even in public forums, we do see people coming together, forming groups, but after some time we don't even know whether the group exists or not. So it dies its own natural death. So this is an important metric to ensure that, to monitor and to know if the community is alive and kicking or not. Right? So that's the first one. The second one is a tactical metric, a tactical measure, which is basically about how has the community renewed itself. When we saw the early slides and we said that a community can have a focus area, it can have an identity for itself, and that identity could range from anything like learning, knowledge sharing, it could be good practices, it could be innovation, innovation that worked, innovation that failed, it could be anything of these. So how has the community evolved itself? How has it renewed itself? So maybe the community came together just to share ideas on something. But having done that for 1 quarter, the entire community decided, okay, let's now focus on mining good practices related to these areas in the way we work. So it moved away from mere knowledge sharing into specific knowledge sharing related to good practices. having done that, they said, okay, we've mined about so many good practices now. Can we adopt this? And by adopting this, can we create some improvisation in our ways of working? Can we look at something that's emerging out of this? So then you see stages of maturity in terms of the identity movement of the community itself. Now, it's never an either and or. It could be either or and a combination of all. So a community can continue to be a learning community, a knowledge sharing community fundamentally, but then that whole learning, knowledge sharing can be focused, it can be streamlined into something more specific, something with a definitive purpose, right? So that's a tactical measure. The next one is a strategic measure, which is where the business is interested in, saying that what is this community influence? So are we saying that before we started this community, we had only X experts in these areas, and after this community has been formed, we have now discovered Y experts, right? So my expert discovery is this much percentage, and it's only increasing quarter on quarter or periodically, right? That's one. Or when we started the community, and this community was looking at only these 5 sub-expertise areas, and today it's covering so many more. So we have discovered so many new expertise areas. So is this an input for some of the department in the company to take up for some structured intervention? So that could be a second influence. The third influence could be, it depends on who the practitioners are, saying that we've been working with a particular business model, and increasingly we're seeing an industry trend which is moving. So we have experimented on a new business model in a fail-safe mode. But can we take this new business model to a larger audience to cover new business models? It could be the number of good practices that were mined, the number of good practices that were mined and adopted, and because of adoption, what kind of operational efficiency was brought about, efficiency or effectiveness that was brought about by adopting the practice. Was it faster requirements engineering? Was it error testing? Was it lower defects, that got into beta? It could be a whole lot of practices related to that. Then you could look at third, which is trend spotting. So when you have a distributed, advocate and change champions who are working for you in a community, and in one of the charters, let's say for this year, we're saying is, okay, let's go look at trend spotting. What are the trends that are coming up, let's say, in virtualization? So that could be an area where communities are going to work on, they're going to share and exchange notes, and through that arrive at some incidences which they can present, right? Or it could be faster adoption of new processes, and more importantly, it could also be process-related improvements. So these are some of the things that we can strategically measure when we have the right scenario which is mapped onto a community, and we also have the right kind of measures that come out of it, right? Now, the enablement, so we've seen these are the operational measures, we've got tactical measures, and then we've got the strategic measures. Now, when we say operational measures, so why I said, the kind of automation systems that we